I want to say a very big thank you to all of our presenters, the management of the Center for the Study of Economies of Africa, CSEA, NOIPolls, and the Africa University of Science and Technology. There's a slight shift in the agenda. We're welcoming our founder and the distinguished Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo Iweala. This fireside chat should have happened right after the reflections by Professor Kingsley Moghalu and Ambassador Elijah. But due to changes in Dr. Okonjo's schedule, we would briefly hold this fireside chat now and jump back to the reflection. And I think that this is very important because it would give us an opportunity to hear from her and for her to also share her perceptions about today's conversation. I want to officially say welcome home, Dr. Ngozi. The last time that we were together was on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, where you spoke to the Global Africa Business Initiative. And I had the honor of being there. Thank you so much for your kindness. And one of the things that struck me in the conversation that you had with Folifa for Al Jazeera was when you spoke about your target for the ministerial conference and wanting to break a record by ensuring that countries ratify the agreement to place a ban on illegal fishing. There was a target for 110 members and 44 African countries, in fact. And with the ministerial conference ending in Abu Dhabi, you secured about 71 ratifications. And some people might think that that is not a broken record, but I think that that is, an A, if you ask me. So, with respect to how the WTO sort of fosters economic diplomacy, can you share with us how the WTO does it to sort of help countries reach a consensus? How does the WTO sort of foster economic diplomacy to uphold its rules-based system?
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, Your Excellencies, and thank you for being here, and it's wonderful to see Kingsley and other old friends also around the table. Well, you seem to know a lot about our ministerial conference, first of all. It's a very kind of technical area, so I'm a little surprised, but if you want to know about it, the ministerial conference, well, first, the WTO is a very unique organization in the sense that this is one of the few places in the world where there's a consensus decision-making system. Meaning every little member, from those who have 300,000 population or 20,000, has the same voice as those who have 1.4 billion, or what the case may be. And there are not many places like that in the world. So this is really very, very interesting. And countries who become members feel very empowered. So consensus decision-making is very difficult. So whilst it's very empowering, it's also extremely challenging because it means any one member can stop an agreement. So when you talk about how do you foster economic diplomacy, it's very tough. It's very tough negotiating multilateral agreements in which every member has to be in agreement. And that's why I'm very proud that at our 12th ministerial, which was my first, 19 months ago, in June 2022, we were able, against all odds, when people had predicted failure, to be able to close more than, can you hear me? We were able to close so many multilateral agreements, more than 6 very important multilateral agreements. And if I add all of them up, actually it goes up to 10. Some of these agreements had been in negotiation for more than 2 decades. And part of it was the fisheries. So we have 2 legacy agreements. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah, 2 legacy agreements, agriculture and fisheries, that have been in negotiations for more than 2 decades. So fisheries was about trying to stop harmful subsidies that lead to illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing of our high seas. And that lead to overfishing, overcapacity. we broke the negotiations into two parts. We first tackled illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, and we got that at MC12 after more than 2 decades. Some of you will recall that this is also SDG target 14.6, and the WTO was charged with delivering this. So this is something that made me extremely happy. Just to give you a figure, in 1970, our oceans were 7% overfished. Today, according to estimates of the Minderoo Foundation, which is a leading edge foundation in Australia, we are 49% overfished. FAO figures are 38% overfished. So whether it's 38 or 49, we're on the wrong side of the ledger. So it was really important to stop this, sort of handing over to our children oceans without fish. But it's not good enough to just get an agreement. For me, ratifying it means it comes into effect. And that's why we were racing. And I kind of used MC13 as a hook in order to get WTO members to act faster than they would have. It takes 3+ years to ratify an agreement at the WTO, usually longer, 5 years, 10 years. And if we are talking about sustainability, we have to do it faster. So I knew we might not get all of the 110, but if I told members that we have to do it by MC13, they would act faster, and that proved right. Everyone was shocked. We got 71 ratifications, and the trend we are on now, I hope that we'll ratify it by this year. And I'm saying to people, my birthday is June. Can your country ratify before my birthday as a birthday present? And I'm very hopeful. So that's what that was about. So we got 71, not 110, but you can see I'm rather happy about it. And we had 11 ratifications delivered during MC13. So that was really beautiful, and we had a nice ceremony. So we have 38. Actually, we are now, when I get back to Geneva, I think there are 4 waiting. So countries, and I'm very proud that Nigeria was one of the very first to ratify the agreement. So our country did something right. When I get back, we will have 38. I have 4 more waiting, and we're looking for 38. We'll get them.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm listening and I'm hearing from you that this is all about strategy. And also there seems to be a systemic approach to getting countries to doing this in terms of economic diplomacy and how you deliver on the goals that you set. I also hear you in terms of timing, and I like that you sort of set realistic goals over a period of time that people can look towards those goals. Like your birthday, for example, is a landmark deadline for everyone. So thank you for sharing that strategy with us. You said something earlier about how every country at MC definitely did have equal opportunities. What does the WTO do specifically to support developing countries deal with their trade issues?
Well, one thing I'm proud about that is little known about the WTO, because many perceive it as a very technical agency, not sexy. They are not, we battle in Geneva because we've got the Human Rights Commission, we've got other very interesting things, and ambassadors far prefer to be engaged in those. So we really have to battle. But I want everyone to know that the WTO is really about people. The founding documents of the WTO in the Marrakesh Agreement says that the WTO's purpose is to enhance living standards, help create employment, and support sustainable development. So the WTO is the GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, was a precursor to the WTO and morphed into the WTO. So WTO itself per se will be 30 this year, but I always think of it as 75 years old. And when they put those documents together 30 years ago, I thought it was really far-sighted to talk about supporting sustainable development. So it's about people. Okay, and that is the essence for me of what we have to deliver, the essence of getting countries to work together by constantly reminding them that the WTO is not just about negotiating agreements. And it's not all about lawyers. Sorry if there are many lawyers in the room. I'm not a lawyer, but I love lawyers, but. But, it's not about legal agreements only. Those agreements are for a purpose. And that purpose is to deliver for people. So I wanted to just highlight that about what we do. And so if you look at it and you work back, you look at all the agreements. So just allow me, I know I'm digressing a bit, but we have a fisheries agreement that's about deliveries for people, sustainability, and for the world, a global common good. We also house the world's intellectual property agreement. And during the pandemic, this became a huge topic about whether we could have flexibilities within the agreement to allow developing countries access, because they were standing at the back of the queue for vaccines. And therefore, how do we manage this so developing countries can manufacture vaccines for themselves? And one of the things I'm very proud of is that they were debating and debating and people were dying, and we came in and said we've got to find a compromise solution. It wasn't perfect. We were able to get flexibilities relaxed for 5 years, so developing countries who want to manufacture the vaccines can do so. So that's one of the things we got. Now fast forward to MC13. For developing countries, what did we get? It wasn't much talked about in the press, maybe because these things are not so sexy to developed countries. But for a decade, 28 least developed countries who are members of the WTO, the poorest, have been trying to negotiate a transition period for when they graduate out of least developed country status into developing. They want the others to agree to give them a transition period to still benefit from the flexibilities in WTO agreements that are there for the poorest countries. And the argument was, even if we graduate, we don't know what the world will be like. The world economy may be in bad shape. We may slip back into least developed country status. So please give us a number of years of transition, maybe 3-4 years. Once things are solid, then we know. And but it was not easy. They were not able to get it for a decade. Bangladesh is graduating out of that status, is one of those that we're talking about, and there are other countries. So they were able this time to negotiate a 3-year transition period, along with other flexibilities, which I don't need to go into now, but I'm very proud of that. And you know, the press doesn't talk about these things, but for me, being from a developing country, is very joyful to think that after a decade we're able to get this. The 90 developing countries at the WTO during MC13 also joined together to ask all the other members, especially the developed countries, that they want this, what is called special and differential treatment. There are other flexibilities available to developing countries in general in WTO agreements of the past. And they think they're not being effectively applied, and they wanted to go and look at them and see how can it benefit us more. Again, for a decade they've been arguing no agreement on even looking at this. Okay, so we got a declaration at MC13 with all members now agreeing that those 90 members, they're called the G90, they are now prepared to work with them to see how they benefit from these flexibilities. And this will be done in taken forward in Geneva. And then the third thing I'm happy about is something very arcane called the e-commerce moratorium. In simple language, it's really an agreement not to tax digital trade, not to put customs duties on electronic transmissions, which is basically part of digital trade. Digital trade is the fastest growing segment of trade now. And digitally delivered services trade, meaning things like streaming services, professional services, back office services, accounting, even medicine delivered over the internet. All these things are growing at 8% per year. It's worth about $3.8 trillion now. And at the rate it's growing, it's going to grow very fast. So not taxing this means you give it an ecosystem in which it can develop. You can grow small and medium enterprises. And initially, developing countries were not so much in favor of this because they didn't see how it benefited them. But as more and more developing countries see that digital trade, there are small and medium enterprises, women running these enterprises, young people are in this ecosystem. Many of them swing to supporting the extension of this moratorium. For 28 years, they've been extending it. The idea is to make it permanent, but there are some members who don't like this. So Indonesia, India, Bangladesh, and South Africa had issues with it. And because of a consensus system, we could not get it done. But this time around, we agreed again to extend it for 2 more years, so there's a reprieve. It will end now March 31st, 2026. They said, let's end it. Any country that wants to charge can charge. Those who don't want, don't have to. But let's give 2 more years. And I think this is okay because it gives business, big and small, time to plan. There are many developing countries, those ones I mentioned, who believe they are losing revenue. As a former finance minister, you have to listen to them and sympathize, because as trade becomes more digital and not goods-based, then, how do you get your revenue? Those who depend on customs duties. But we've tried to do studies with the IMF and so on that show that there may be more effective ways, like the VAT, to collect what you need than digital taxes on digitally delivered services. So we got that extended. That was another thing. One thing we did not get, where I'm a bit disappointed, is the second part of fisheries. We were negotiating the second fish 2 on overcapacity and overfishing. We didn't close that. But I'm not too unhappy. We're so close. So I think we can try and deliver it in Geneva. And finally, we didn't get agriculture. That didn't surprise me. This is an election year. There are farmers demonstrating in almost every country you can think of. It's highly politicized, and members were not able to come to agreement on some of the key provisions. That's not surprising. But I will tell you one thing. At MC12, for 2.5 decades, the agriculture negotiations have been on with no result. At MC12, we established a text and it failed when we got there. It was the only thing we didn't get at MC12. We got to MC13, a text was established, and the good thing I have to tell you, yes, we didn't get the negotiations, but the text is still valid. All members agreed to negotiate off of this text, so I have some hope down the line. So that's where we are. Sorry to be so long, but you can see I'm pretty excited about what we got, a bit disappointed at what we didn't get. But I think we didn't do too bad.
Well, thank you so much. Can we put our hands together for Dr. Okonjo? What I find interesting with your response is you pretty much responded to a question that I didn't ask you, which is the question on e-commerce and digital trade. And I want to give a shout out to our senior research fellow, Professor Emmanuel Wosu, who exposed me to a concept of strategic foresight. And I see that coming to play in your response here, where you seem to go ahead of the curve to sort of wait for the problem before it arrives and even begin solving it. So these are some of the insights that I'm taking away from you, and I wouldn't bother with asking that question. Because it's Women's History Month, please pardon me, I was also going to ask about specific initiatives that the WTO has for women, but I did my own little research and found nearly $50 million in funding made available to sort of boost trade for women. So instead of asking to sort of label that, I want to know what your message is to the women out there. You have a mantra which says that it's not about the opportunities before us, but how we use them. What is your message to women, not just in Nigeria, but all across the world, especially for Women's History Month?
Well, my message for women, I have total respect. Women are resilient, they're hardworking, many of them succeed against all odds, and I just want to say to women to keep going. Never give up the fight. I'm sorry, men in the room, I'm not, we need men supporting women because women can't do it alone, quite frankly. But women, have so many odds against them. I mean, it might look like women are succeeding because you have more female leadership in many positions. So things are improving, but they're improving at such a slow rate. And if you look at the numbers, you still see women everywhere. My dream is when they stop saying, she's the first woman to do this, and she's the first African, and she's the first this. People think I get excited when I hear that. I actually get depressed. When they say she's the first woman and first African and first this, I'm like, why? in this day and age. You know, I don't want it to be that way. I want it to be that it's normal. You know, like when I was finance minister here, I was the first woman. And my dream, I worked hard in one way, and I know I was being invited to many places I didn't go. And I said to the women, the best thing I can do for women is really try to deliver. Because I want that when I leave, it becomes normal that a woman is finance minister. One of the things I'm really proud of is, yes, it did happen. And after I left, we had 2 women, 2 more, is it 3 even? So we want a situation in which women stop being firsts. And it's normal to have a woman leading. That's what I wish the women this month. I wrote a book about it with Julia Gillard called Women and Leadership. Julia Gillard is the first and only female Prime Minister of Australia. And she and I are friends. And when we found we had very similar experiences in leadership, we decided to write a book about it. And then we thought, well, maybe the 2 of us are odd. Let's go talk to other women leaders. And so we talked to them. We talked to Jacinda Ardern. We talked to Hillary Clinton. We talked to Ellen Johnson Sirleaf and on. 8 women. And we found remarkably, and I talked to Angela Merkel later on, and it was the same story. She's not in the book. But, you know, I had a meeting with her where we talked these things over, and she had exactly the same kinds of experience. So we try to capture. We're not telling you what to do, but what we say to women leaders is, this is what you might encounter. So be ready. We can't change it, but at least if you know this is what is going to happen, it helps you to build resilience. Women need to be very resilient. So that's my message.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. The Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo Iweala.
Thank you. And thank you so much for taking your precious time to listen. Okay. She said pictures.
Dr. Nikuda.
Very quick. You didn't answer the one picture.
Please join us on stage briefly.
Thank you so much. Really great. Lovely seeing all of you.